I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig. Welcome to my new series called The Pivot. We are so excited to bring you deeper conversations with people who've made really impactful changes in their lives. We're going to find out how they do it and how you can also learn from their experience. We're thrilled to be partnering with Signal Relief, a pain patch reliever. I've used it and had tremendous success. We're really excited to have you join us and learn more about how to make the important pivots in your life. Welcome to The Pivot. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig, and we have Candace Bushnell today. You know her as the author of Sex and the City, and her series was turned into a phenomenon on HBO with the same name. And she's going to discuss with us about dating in your 50s and beyond, and some of the observations she has made about women and men dating during this time. She's also going to tell us about some new projects she's working on and the biggest pivot in her life. Candace, I always love interviewing you. I could interview you every day because you are so present in the world. And of course, everybody knows you from your book, Sex and the City, that was turned into an HBO special. And since then, you've written multiple books. And I think your latest is There Still Sex in the City? And you also have a one-woman show. So I read your article in New York Magazine, and you really brought the reader into the world of what it's like dating in one's 60s. Tell me what inspired you to write this article.
Well, actually, they asked me to do it.
That was the inspiration. They asked.
Yes, they asked. And, Is There Still Sex in the City was a lot about dating in your 50s. And it was about rediscovering girlfriends. It really was like Sex in the City 25, 30 years later. And, since then, I think that came out in 2019. And I do use part of the different types of guys who you will meet in my one woman show, which I am going to be doing in the Hamptons at Guildhall.
So let's talk about that too, because you have two shows coming out.
Yes, I do. They asked if I wanted to do a story about dating over 60, and I said, sure. And I thought, because I have so many single girlfriends who are now, they were in their 50s years ago. Now they're 60, 65, 67. And, a lot of these women they're still looking for a guy. And the reality is, I have one friend who found someone, but it's somebody who she dated a long time ago. And that seems to be kind of the biggest path towards ending up with someone, is that it's somebody who you knew from the past. And I thought I hadn't done that much dating, but then I realized I had actually gone on quite a few dates in the last 6 years and, last 5 years. And, even joined a dating app, Raya.
It's very hard to get into Raya. What do you notice about women dating in their 50s and 60s? Because you look at dating almost through a sociological lens and like a researcher, noticing the shifts and changes and desires that people have dating, during a different time in their life.
Yes. Well, the reality is that dating is really hard for everybody these days, no matter what your age. So I feel actually worse for women who are in their 20s and 30s because they are, they're looking for their person. If you're in your 50s or 60s, chances are you found your person and it didn't work out. So, and you're also not looking to find someone to partner with to have kids. So that's the big difference. And I think that it's really difficult for young women because they have so many bad experiences. I mean, when I was in my 20s or 30s, I would go on a blind date and chances were like that guy might be my boyfriend for a year, a couple of years. Um, it somehow it felt much easier to make a connection with somebody, to have some kind of connection. And young women today, they have a lot of bad experiences. I mean, there would be a couple of bad experiences, but overall, I remember dating was fun. It was interesting. The men seemed pretty interesting. It wasn't, people weren't just looking to hook up the way it seems like a lot of people are today. There wasn't this ghosting idea.
I hate ghosting.
I mean, there weren't like so many different opportunities to communicate with people. There were no cell phones. You couldn't text. You couldn't follow people on Instagram. You made that phone call, or they called you, and then it was so exciting when you got that phone call and you'd stay on the phone for 3 hours. Like that seems like it would never happen today. So I think that young women have a lot of bad experiences.
And men, I just want to say too, because I treat a lot of men in my practice and they can't tell who really likes them. It's very hard. And I think there's something about the apps too, where you don't know someone within their context. You don't know who their friends are. You don't know what they've experienced. I think in the old days, we could ask a friend, what do you think of this person? And we'd get kind of an idea of what this person is like.
Yes. Well, I always say human beings, we are amazing at judging people in person. You can get so much information from seeing somebody in person. I mean, there's just, I feel like we're just flooded with all kinds of information, maybe even including their scent. And these are things that we don't have on screen, which is why movie stars exist. Because when someone is on a screen, we fill in the blanks of what they're really like. We look at a photograph and we start making up stories in our minds, what our interaction is going to be like. And then when it happens in person, then it's at such odds with the fantasy that I do think it's a problem. If you're looking for anything other than like true love on a dating app, you can easily find it. You can find a sugar daddy. You can find, somebody who's a lot younger than you are to have sex with. You can find probably like every kink. You can find that, but finding the person who's true blue seems to be very difficult.
I think it's always difficult, but you mentioned in the article and other times that we have spoken, this idea about ageism. And I think so many people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s look amazing. I mean, almost younger than they ever have and almost ageless in a way. And they lead with their energy. But you talk about this internalized ageism and also just in the dating world that it does exist.
Oh, it totally exists. I mean, and of course, people always disagree with this, but in general, Men out there are not saying, I want to be with a 65-year-old woman. Maybe if they're 90, but in general, they are not saying that, hey, I want to be with a woman in her 60s. Just like it's, and the reverse is true as well, because, you're in your 60s, you're the age of a grandparent, really, for most people. And, you know, grandpa and grandma, that's not most people's idea of, wow, that's going to really turn me on. And that's one of the realities. Now, of course, there are always people who will argue like, I'm a guy and I don't care how old somebody is, and you know this and that. But it's out there. That's the reality.
You're somebody that gets noticed. I mean, you talked about kind of not feeling relevant at times, but you're busier than ever. You are turning your latest book into a TV show. I want to hear about your one woman show, which I was fortunate enough to see at the Carlisle. You're always working on something really creative.
Well, I think part of that is that, there's less money in all of these creative fields, and there's more busyness, because of things like podcasts and social media. And, I just talked to Fern Malice the other night, who she started seventh on sixth, which is the big fashion, the tents, the whole fashion thing. And she said, like, I am working with a 9-year-old fashion designer who she said is incredible. And she's doing a collaboration with him. They met on Instagram. So there are lots, there are all kinds of opportunities that and creative outlets that just didn't exist before. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people feel very busy, and how one ends up being busy, because they're more creative outlets.
What would you say, Candace, is the biggest pivotal moment for you recently or even in the past? How would you define the major pivotal moment?
Well, I mean, for me, a pivotal moment was really after the pandemic. I said, you know what? I don't want to spend so much time by myself, which is, required when you're writing a book. And, before that, I would, sometimes I would go out for an hour, and then the rest of the time I was writing. And I just said, I don't really want to do that. So I started doing this one woman show. It was originally called Is There Still Sex in the City?
Okay.
But now it's called True Tales of Sex, Success, and Sex in the City.
And it's running in July, right? Mid-July and a little bit later in July.
It's a one night only at a particular theater kind of situation. And, because we're not in the theater world, we don't get it, but there are tons of regional theaters out there, and they all need programming. So they will have, it's usually stand-up comedians, podcasts, live podcasts they do sometimes, and then occasionally they'll do a show like mine, or they do like Luann de Lesseps cabaret. So these are always like one night only theater gigs in different places. I mean, I've gone to Prague, all over London, Scotland, Budapest, Zurich, Oslo, Copenhagen. It's been great. But I would say the pivot for me was going on stage and stepping on stage, which is something that I had never done before.
And you're so good. I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, the whole audience is riveted by you. And we feel like we've kind of grown up with you, that we're friends with you, and we have been a witness to your life and kind of are there to support what you want for yourself. I don't know if you feel that way when you look into the audience.
It depends on the audience because I've done the show at the Palladium in London, which holds like 2,500 people. And then when I do it at the Carlisle, because they have to take some couple tables out, that ends up being about 85 people. And when I do it at the Carlisle, I do know a lot of the people in the audience. But if it's at a place like the Palladium, no.
What have you learned about yourself as a performer on stage?
It's just about discipline. It's like if I had to liken it to anything, it used to be like riding horses, riding dressage, where you've got a certain time, you are going in that ring, whether you want to or not, and you have to do your best and you have to do different things at these, at different letters. And that's pretty much what the stage show is like because it's choreographed. So I know when I say this line, I go over here. And then when I say that line, I go over there. And I guess mostly what I've learned is like, don't shout, which I'm probably doing right now because my director said if you shout and you overact, people stop paying attention and they just start looking at you like you're weird or maybe there's something wrong with you. So I suppose it's like going more into yourself and just telling your story.
I know we're coming to a close here, but what is your advice to women? It could even go back to 30s and up to their 60s. What is your advice for women who are getting older and single to living a fulfilling and rewarding life?
One thing that I always do, I always think back to women who were of my mother's era and, the mothers of my friends. And there were so many women who took up doing something creative. It was like they'd always wanted to be a painter or they wanted to be a writer or they had some creative dream that they wanted to fulfill, but they weren't able to do that when they were younger. And that's really what I remember about my mother's friends is that so many of them took up a creative pursuit. If you can do that, I think it's a great thing. It's really rewarding. In fact, I have a friend who she's in her late 60s. She took up painting probably, about 8 to 10 years ago, and she paints full time and she's an artist and she loves it. I think it's about finding that kind of meaning.
I agree. And I like when you said that turning 60 is like waking up from a bad dream. You kind of, I don't know, it's like you get life more. You're able to make more astute observations. Candace, thank you for being a friend to me and joining the show. Always so exciting to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Have a great rest of your summer.
Hopefully I will see you soon.
I would love that. I would love that. Okay. We'll make that happen. Thank you, Candace.
Thank you.
Bye.